It's cold outside, and I have my nice hot cup of Earl Grey tea, and I am ready to talk books. Hi everybody, and welcome to my January 2017 wrap-up video. In order to keep the length of these videos down in the future, I probably will switch to a format where I do a wrap-up video after every, say, 3 to 5 books, instead of doing it for just an entire month. January was a phenomenal reading month for me. I ended up making it through 10 books in total, 4 of which I read for Diversathon, and I already talked about those in my Diversathon wrap-up video, which I will link in the description and at the end of this video. So now we're going to go back and talk about the first 6 books I finished this year. The first book I read this year was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I read the Kindle version of this book, so I have no cover to show you, so again, cover up here for you to look at. City of Bones is the first book in the Mortal Instruments series, and by now I can't imagine that I have anybody watching this video that doesn't know what that series is and what this book is. So I'm not going to spend any time describing this book. I've tried reading this book several times before, and each time I kind of gave up, I don't know, somewhere fewer than 100 pages into the book. On this attempt, however, I was spurred on by the fact that I had watched the first season of Shadowhunters, the freeform TV show spin-off of the Mortal Instruments series. I really liked the show, and I was really interested to see how the books tied into the show, if at all. And I'll have to say that, at least for the first book and the first season, there are a lot of differences. I don't really have too much else to say about the book. It was okay. It wasn't the best novel. It wasn't the worst novel I've ever read. It's very, very middle of the road for me. I enjoyed it enough, and I'm invested enough in the TV series that I want to continue on and read the rest of the books in the Mortal Instruments series. I'm also really hoping that because this was Cassandra Clare's first ever published novel, that as the series continues, her writing will get better and better. And I'm always kind of so-so about the first book in a series, so I'm willing to give the rest of it a shot. The second book I read this year was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I have seen so many people on BookTube rave about Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows duology, and I really, really want to read those, but I feel kind of disingenuous reading them without reading this original trilogy that Leigh wrote about this particular universe. So I thought I would start there, and I have to say that I really wasn't very disappointed. This first book in the Grisha trilogy follows an orphan named Alina as she discovers her magical powers and gets caught up in the political intrigue of her kingdom. I'm not going to say too much more about that. There's a lot of information and videos out there about the plotline of this book. What I will say is that I really enjoyed reading Shadow and Bone. It was a solid 4 out of 5 stars for me. As with many first books in a series, there was a lot of emphasis in Shadow and Bone on world building and character development. And while Alina's internal dialogue could be a bit annoying, I still really enjoyed discovering the world along with her. I have to say that I'm hooked, and I immediately ordered the next book in the series, Siege and Storm, from my local library. The third book I read this year was Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I also read this in Kindle format, so I will show you the cover over here. I completely devoured this book in one day during the time that we traveled back from New Orleans. The main character of Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda is, as you may guess, Simon. And Simon is a gay high school boy who is growing up in the American South. The book follows a budding relationship between Simon and a boy named Blue, who is also a student at his high school. However, their relationship is completely happening over email, and neither one knows the other's identity. At the beginning of the book, another classmate of Simon's named Martin ends up seeing the emails between Simon and this student Blue and says that he'll expose Simon and Blue if Simon doesn't help him try to get a date with the new girl in school named Abby, and Abby and Simon just happen to be friends. I don't want to give too much away, but as you can imagine, over the course of the book, things get really complicated. I was pleasantly surprised at how well the book tackled issues like homophobia, racism, social inequity, and body image issues, but still managed to maintain the feeling of a upbeat, fun-filled teenage romance. The love that grows up between Simon and Blue is so endearing, and I would challenge anybody to read this book and not immediately fall in love with both of them. Overall, a highly recommended, easy read for anybody. The fourth book I finished in January was a graphic novel called Beautiful Darkness. It was written by Fabian Vellman and illustrated by Karis Goat. I'm really not sure if I pronounced that correctly, and if you're watching this and I didn't, I'm very, very sorry. Beautiful Darkness actually was my first 5-star read of 2017. I absolutely loved this book. In my written review, I described this book as Inside Out meets Lord of the Flies with the pacing of the movie Speed. While the beautiful illustrations in this book make it seem as though it could be a children's book, it is anything but. Beautiful Darkness is a dark and kind of frankly terrifying tale that is kind of laid out at a very relentless pace. It forces readers to really consider what kind of horrors we harbor within ourselves, even if we're young children. I absolutely love this book, and I would highly recommend that anybody read it, as long as you're not squeamish. The fifth book that I finished this year was Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and I actually listened to this book on audiobook, and it was narrated by the author Elizabeth Gilbert. In Big Magic, Gilbert offers each of us a way to engage with creativity in the creative process outside of the usual depiction of the tortured artist. This approach includes a lot of magical thinking and personification, and I think it would best be described as a witch's guide to creativity. Gilbert acknowledges that producing art is a process that involves a lot of hard work, but it doesn't always have to be at the expense of the artist's psychological or physical health. I think there are a lot of wonderful takeaways from Big Magic that could be applied to any creative endeavor, and I would wholeheartedly recommend that people check out this book if you think that you engage with the creative process in any way, shape, or form. The sixth and final book that I finished in the month of January prior to the start of Diversathon was Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin and translated by, I think, Megan McDowell. This book offers a lot of layers crammed into what is a very, very short volume. There's only, I think, 120 some pages. I lie, 180 some pages. I don't want to give too much away about this novel, so I wanted to read just a bit of the jacket description because I think it does a better job than I can of explaining the premise of this book. A young woman named Amanda lies dying in a rural hospital clinic. A boy named David sits beside her. She's not his mother. He's not her child. The whole book consists of that conversation that happens between Amanda and David while Amanda recounts the days that kind of lead up to the situation that she's in now in the hospital. Ultimately, I'm really not quite sure what to think of Fever Dream because of the fact that there are so many layers in this book. It is very hard to digest, and I feel like I may need to read it, I don't know, 3 or 4 more times to actually figure out some semblance of what exactly is happening. Ultimately, this book is intriguing and compelling, and there are elements that remind me of one of my favorite books, Bless Me Ultima by Rudolfo Anya. And while I still have no concrete idea what I think about this novel, if any part of this babbling discussion sounded interesting to you, I would encourage you to check out Fever Dream. That's it. Those are the 6 books that I read in January prior to the start of Diversathon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I read 4 more books during Diversathon, and if you want to hear me speak about those, please check out my Diversathon wrap-up video, which I will link in the description as well as at the end of this video. If you've read any of these books, I would be interested to know what you thought of them, so leave your feedback or links to your review or video in the comment section. As always, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment box below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a wonderful day.